What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Today, we're going to talk about an idea. For some of you guys that had they get my email letter, then you kind of have a pre-frame for this thing. But we're going to talk about my case for why I do not want Jiu-Jitsu to be an Olympic sport, because I've been asked the question. It's one of the more common questions I've gotten over the last 10 years since I started doing YouTube videos. And over the years, people have asked, hey, Chewy, do you think that Jiu-Jitsu, do you want it to be an Olympic sport? Mm-hmm. And my answer to that question is always a big, bearded, emphatic, unequivocal, just throwing out words now. Hell no. Hell no. I don't want it to be an Olympic sport. And I have very specific reasons as to why. And I think that if it became an Olympic sport, a lot of what we like about Jiu-Jitsu, as far as competitions and even the way that we practice, would change dramatically, and maybe not for the better. And again, now this is my own bearded philosophy, my own bearded opinion. So you take this and chew on it. But again, I think that I make a fairly decent case on some of these, in some aspects to this, and you can listen to it and see what you think. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys have never tried CBD, or if you've never tried Charlotte's Web CBD, it's worth checking out. Again, I use Charlotte's Web towards the end of the evening. It's part of my sort of nighttime wind down routine. For me, I don't know about you guys, I get really sort of dialed in with my sleep as I get older, because I found, like, back in 2022, had some issues with like struggling sleeping, like to the point where I was like, man, do I have insomnia? I remember one time taking like NyQuil, just I was like, I want to go to sleep. And instead of sleeping, I just stayed awake. And I found that, like, you know, I have special colored bulbs in my lamps around the house. I have blackout curtains. I have a sleep time that I like, basically an alarm to go to sleep, to make sure I'm in bed to begin the process off. I typically read to wind down, and then I have a process, you know, and I go through this. And again, sleep is super, super important for recovery. And again, one of the things that I do like to add into the mix for recovery to help me as an older grappler that's trying to keep training and stay in shape and all that other stuff is Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys want to check them out, go to charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off. I typically use either a gummy or the tincture, which is a little dropper. I'll do it about 30 minutes before bed, and it seems to assist me with my nighttime routine. Also, guys, if you want to check out some jiu-jitsu gear for yourself, you can do so by going to epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. With Matt's stuff that he produced, I really like it, and I like it enough that I'm getting my new rash guards made from him, and I'm really excited about those. If you guys follow me in any way on social media or in YouTube, you will start to see these pop up in videos and some of the content I'm producing. I really am. I think they're beautiful. I've been wearing them around at the gym, because the way that I basically decide whether or not I'm going to, you know, come out with a new rash guard set or release it is I'll get a prototype made and I'll start wearing it in front of my students. And if they kind of go, oh, what's that? You know, then I know we're on something. And that's been the case. Like, everybody's like, hey, how do I get these? How do I get these? And so I'll have those released in the near future. And it'll be made by Epic Roll. But if you guys want to check out any of their stuff, epicrollbjj.com, promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to the patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. When you sign up for it, or when you get to that website, you'll be able to see the perks that you get for signing up for it. One of those perks, in case you guys don't like ads, is to get an ad-free version of this podcast. But you'll also get some other perks, like recordings we've done at seminars and warm-up routines that Eugene's put together specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners. A lot more stuff. If you want to look it up, go to patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And also, guys, last, if you guys want to get my daily email letter that I send out, again, you can go to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. I enjoy writing the letter. Thousands of people get it every morning or every evening, depending on where they are in the world. And it goes into everything that I think could possibly be useful to you. Everything from, you know, training, jiu-jitsu tips, lifting tips, dieting ideas, just anything and everything, books I'm reading, just anything that I think could be useful to you, to give you some idea to chew on for the day that could be useful to you on or off the mat. It's there at my website, chewjitsu.net/join. So, guys, with that said, let's jump into this idea with jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. I think when people ask that question, most people think that jiu-jitsu being in the Olympics, Brazilian jiu-jitsu being in the Olympics, would be a great thing. You know, they're, oh man, it'd be so good, right? Like, what do you think that, you know, they should do? And this question's been asked to me numerous ways. Some people just ask sort of like, how, or what do you think it would, or what do you think about the jiu-jitsu being in the Olympics? But then other people will sometimes ask, what do you think we need to do to make it an Olympic sport?
Mhm.
And again, I'm always like, no, I don't want it to be an Olympic sport. And I'll give you some reasons why.
So Chewy, hold on.
Okay.
Let me, I want to ask you this question.
Okay.
What is the argument for people wanting it to be an Olympic sport? What's kind of the main argument? I have some ideas, but I want to hear kind of what you've heard.
I guess the idea would be that, with an Olympic sport, it grows, right? It's going to grow. But I think jiu-jitsu, the thing is jiu-jitsu is growing without the need for an Olympic sport, right? It's already growing. But I think that the drive would be that it takes it to another level because of the prestige, and
Okay.
I think sometimes, another thing too, is I think that people they don't really know why. They just think, oh, yeah, that's it. Look at the Olympics. It's so popular. It's so big. We should have it in the Olympics like everything else.
Yeah.
It's like this. So as an example, I'm going to give you guys we're going to go on a quick tangent. I will tie it in, I promise. Many of you guys, especially if you were males, when you grew up and you started to get into your late teens and early 20s, you started to reach a point where you felt like you needed to have a nice car, right? Nice car seemed like a really important thing to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you probably didn't even know why. You were just like, I feel like I need a nice car, right? Now, you may not know this. There was a guy named Edward Bernays, really interesting fella, who did propaganda for the military during, the World War stuff. But he got out of that and he started helping. He got into advertising.
Yep.
The guy's responsible for things like eggs and bacon being part of a breakfast. Like Americans didn't used to eat eggs and bacon for breakfast. He basically got some doctors to say, hey, this is really good for you. Like for breakfast, keeps you full. So eggs and bacon for breakfast. He comes out with an ad campaign. Boom. That is our breakfast, right? A bunch of eggs and bacon eating people. By the way, I like eggs and bacon.
I do too. It's good.
Delicious.
Yep.
And then one of his other campaigns was to help car companies sell more cars, because you got to think back in the days, okay, we got a car. It was seen more as a utility, right? And so people didn't go out and just buy new cars. So what he did was, he's like, okay, we got to get people to buy more cars. So he linked it to male virility, meaning like your masculinity, your potency as a man, right? So basically he came out with all these different ad campaigns to link it towards that. And some of the ad campaigns back in like the early 1900s were like ruthless. If you look at them, like, man, it's like another fun one is most of you guys probably don't know this. Listerine was originally a floor cleaner. And then wasn't selling very well. So you know what they did? They made it a mouthwash, and they came up with this idea of halitosis, bad breath. And the ad campaign that they launched that initially sold millions of dollars worth of this stuff was this it's a drawn picture. It's a famous ad. You can go look it up. And it's a picture of a woman who looks very sad. And it said, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And it's talking about how, like, if she only didn't have that stank breath, that some man would want to take her home. And so it's like, so you get these ideas that are imprinted, right? Now, what happens eventually is like, it becomes just cultural. Like, this is what we do, right? And you're like, well, because, you think about like, why do you have to give a woman a diamond ring before you marry her? Because someone's trying to sell some damn diamonds. So they're like, we got to make this a thing, right?
Sure.
And then, 100 years later, you're like, that's just what we do, right? So anyway, going back to the car thing, sometimes it's just like, oh, well, we have to get a car because for some reason we all feel that this car thing is really important to us.
Yeah.
When we're young and we think it's going to make us more of a man if we have a nice car. And this is why you'll see, like, if you get a young guy who gets a couple nickels to rub together, I'm guilty of it too. A bunch of dummies. What do? We go spin it on a car, right?
Yep. This
is why, like, soldiers that come back from deployment and stuff. I remember you just see, if you had a big base, in the military, like, bro, you'd see used car lots around there, vultures waiting for them, because you get these young guys in their early 20s that just came back from a deployment. They've got money in the bank, and what happens? They're going to sell them a Camaro on like tons of interest. And I mean, it's terrible, terrible stuff. Anyway, so with that said, I think sometimes, Eugene, to answer your question, is that sometimes people just don't really know why. They just think, well, that's a good thing. We should just go with it. Now, they may have some good, clear reasons. I don't really know what those are, but I think that people sometimes just see it and it looks like it's a good thing to be in the Olympics. So, well, we want our thing to be in the Olympics too.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what it is. I personally, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think if we're talking about the sport, evolution of a sport or a martial art or whatever, like, I don't know if it's going to have the same impact that we, I don't know. I think jiu-jitsu is still growing so much. There's not a ton of, we'll get into why you don't think it should be an Olympic sport, but like, I don't know if it's got quite the prestige in some aspects. Yes. But like, do you know who won the judo Olympics at this weight? in this year. You really don't. So I don't.
Most people don't.
Most people don't.
And not unless you're a judo fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of other competitions. So I just think I don't know. I think the Olympics does have a certain prestige of being every 4 years, has something like that's just hard to get there and hard to win. But I don't know what ultimately that it does as far as evolution of a sport or something like that.
Well, I don't know what it would add. I mean, I know what the evolution looks like, but I don't know what it would add to jiu-jitsu currently compared to what we have now. Because while our current model obviously has some issues, right? I think it has some advantages with flexibility that that the Olympics do not have.
All right.
We're ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So first off, let's talk about the rules. So when we look at our grappling brethren of judo, right? You can look at what happened to judo. Right now, you may love the way judo is currently, and that's a possible thing, and that is completely okay. But when you go back and look at judo, like years past, like way back in the day, even like 20 years ago, you see a variety of things that you won't see anymore. For instance, groundwork. They used to have good groundwork. Like now with judo, it's like not really considered much in ground. They have a little newaza, but not a lot. But back in the day, like you could go watch some of the old judo stuff's in black and white. And these guys are doing stuff where you could have put that dude into like the world championships of jiu-jitsu up until like the early 2000s, and he probably would have won. I mean, it was advanced. It wasn't backwards stuff. And if you go back and watch some really old judoka videos, you'll see them doing things that we think are, quote, advanced jiu-jitsu techniques now that we came up with that they're doing like 100 years ago.
Sure.
Right. So there's a lot to judo that was sort of taken off the table with the groundwork. Right.
Well, I think when we talked to Robert Drysdale way back, about the history of jiu-jitsu and stuff, you talk about, a lot of jiu-jitsu has taken from judo, and judo had so much more ground game as opposed to, with the Olympics and the popularity of the Olympics, it's really kind of carved judo into the specific thing that we see now.
Well, and that's my issue with it. Okay, so so we take away groundwork. Well, groundwork wasn't the only thing they took away. A leg attack on throws. So when I say leg attacks, I don't mean leg locks. I mean like where you're grabbing legs. Things like kataguruma, which is like a fireman's carry, or they literally had variations of double legs and stuff in judo, right? They took those away. I think it was about 20-ish years ago. And that changed a lot of people's games because some people's best throws were kataguruma and things like that, and took away their best throws. They took away a lot of grip breaking. Like you can't double hand grip break.
Correct.
So once you're locked up, you're locked up. And then they took away a lot of different grips from holding, like things like cross collars. You can't just get a cross collar and hold. They take it away. And again, this is I've read some of the stuff. And again, I could have some of those rules messed up, but if I'm correct, I believe that I'm on track with this. But a lot of them was saying they were trying to get rid of passivity.
Okay.
And they're trying to encourage the throw, basically. Right. And my issue with this is that if you have this big, giant governing body, and if the Olympics is involved, the Olympics becomes the prize, this big governing body that is in charge will then begin to exert its force all over jiu-jitsu, and that will become the predominant way of doing it.
Yes.
Right. And so think about judo, like let's go to jiu-jitsu for a second. Let's imagine that the IBJJF, because I feel like the IBJJF sort of tries to mimic some of the feel of the IJF.
Okay. Imagine
that the IBJJF, let's say 10 years ago, became the governing body for the Olympic jiu-jitsu, right? Like, so jiu-jitsu gets into the Olympics, IBJJF is in charge. Okay. Well, you probably wouldn't have seen the leg lock sort of explosion that we saw, right? Because if they became the prize, they're very restrictive on leg locks. They've loosened up a little bit now. Talk about that in a second. But 10 years ago, I mean, you could even do heel hooks at black belt level. Right. So you wouldn't have seen all these guys doing all this crazy leg lock stuff because it would be not on the table for them. It wouldn't be used for the big show. Right. Maybe for some professional events, maybe you have a thing where you have like amateur jiu-jitsu, right, which is the Olympics. And then you have professional jiu-jitsu like boxing. There's amateur boxing and professional boxing. They're scored very differently. Like amateur boxing is like you're touching different points in their body. It's not about the big knockout. Professional boxing is more about like damage and things like that, right? It's a different sport. So maybe we would go that route. I don't know. But you would definitely see a force exerted where, you may not be able to do leg locks, just as an example. But what happened with jiu-jitsu? That's not what happened. IBJJF, while it is a massive organization as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, and it exerts a certain force, If you don't like the IBJJF, which many people don't, you can take your ball and you can go somewhere else. And that's what happened. A lot of people were not competing in the IBJJF, big names, because they're like, you don't even allow heel hooks at black belt. What is this? And so what happened? A few years ago, the IBJJF began to allow heel hooks at black belt and brown belt divisions in the adult division. Hey, we're exerting our force, right? And think about it that way too, is if you had one big organization that's exerting its force, you probably wouldn't have things like PGF, EBIs, CGIs, ADCCs. You would have all these organizations, but because of the freewheeling open nature of jiu-jitsu, we get to go in different directions. We get to have all these flavors of jiu-jitsu. You don't necessarily have that with judo, right? You don't have that as much because, again, everything's about going to the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one of the things that I would be concerned about, is having an organization that would have a disproportionate amount of control to exert on it, where instead of it, you know, for instance, if an organization does well in jiu-jitsu right now, it's because people find value in it. You run a good tournament, you put together a good product, we're going to sign up and go to it. That's kind of what happens. If you don't want to be there, you won't be there. And so for you to stay in business, you know, it's kind of like a free market. You're going to have to deliver a good product, because otherwise most of us at this point don't care. We're going to compete where we feel like we can get the best experience. You saw that with the ADCC, where it was like prestige money. Oh, well, we're taking the money, right? We're going to go. I mean, obviously some people stayed in the ADCC, but they only had limited spots for the CGI, but a lot of people jumped ship. And, you know, the CGI exerted a lot of force on the ADCC and made them change some of the stuff that they do with their policies, right? It's not going to happen if you have one governing body that's basically like, take it or leave it. It's our way or no way. So that's one of the big reasons, is because I don't like I look back at old judo and I think it was really cool. And I look at jiu-jitsu and like, I wouldn't want a governing body to always constantly restrict it even more. I like jiu-jitsu's sort of way of doing it, where we do come up with rules, we tweak rules from time to time, but for the most part, if a trend exists, if a new position exists, instead of trying to restrict it because we don't want to see it, you start to see competitors, they find a way to solve it. You know, and I like that. You know, now there's some different things like, you know, 50-50 and gi, which sometimes I wish they would deal with, you know, because you can't do heel hooks. But other than that, you typically find people that find their own solutions. And I would rather allow the competitors to do that more often than constantly making it more and more restrictive till you're looking at something that doesn't even resemble it, right? And I've talked to a lot of old judoka who basically are like, man, this sport's just, you know, it's not what it used to be.
Well, so, yeah. And then judo looks one way. Like jiu-jitsu, like we just talked about, you look at the different rule sets, you have very different styles of jiu-jitsu, very different focuses. Some are points, no points, obviously, right? And you have a different way to play that type of game. You have EBI, you have time limits, no time limits. You have different time limits. We've got rounds and different types of scoring. So I think that allows for people to create maybe even different techniques or different styles of training or different training methodologies, whatever that is. I think, you know, jiu-jitsu has been around for a while, but it's still evolving very quickly. And I think we're still like such a huge growth phase that, like, if you just make it a funnel into this one thing, you're going to take all that. You've talked about going to a gym and like you train at a gym or you go visit a gym and everybody does things exactly the same way. Like everybody's the same type. You're basically rolling with the same person over and over again. There's not a lot of creativity, obviously, and that also can stifle the growth and the evolution, essentially. And I just think it'd be terribly not a good thing for jiu-jitsu.
Well, and going back to it, right? Like your creativity is going to get stifled if this is the way we have to do it. That's absolutely right.
Well, because that's the only way to make money or the only way to make a name or make a career. Right.
So the other thing, and this happened recently, is that I was reading an article about the past Olympics, and there was a Serbian fella, if I'm correct, who comes out and he motions the cross, right? Basically he's walking. It was so quick. It was innocuous. Like he's just walking out and he like does this cross. And I might be doing this wrong. When I grew up, I was a Baptist. So I think is it like up, down?
You're asking the wrong guy.
I'm asking a Jew. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know. So
you know, maybe I
was a Baptist. So I don't know, but I know it's, you know, it's a cross chest where he's making a cross on his body and, you know, saying a prayer to God, right?
Yeah.
To his God. We'll say it that way, right? Because you may have a different God. So he's saying that and he comes out. He was suspended for 5 months for that. I was like, what? Like I read, I was like, what? Suspended because they have some sort of like laws against religion or whatever.
I'm curious as to who that bothers exactly. Like what's the purpose of that? Number one, like, is that like who? I'm just curious if like this is the first time I'm hearing about this. You tell me, what is the purpose of that? I'm just questioning it. Like, why? That's it. That's my question. Why? Yeah.
Some person probably complained. And so instead of just simply saying, hey, listen, relax, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like 90s. It would have been like, that's you issue. He's making a prayer, whatever, deal with it. You know,
I'm just curious.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. But my thing with it is when I think about jiu-jitsu, going back to again, okay, so this is a Olympic rule that they've pushed onto this judo event, right? I wouldn't want that to be in jiu-jitsu. I've competed against Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists, whatever, everything in between. I've had guys sit there and make a prayer to their preferred God as they come out on the mat. Who cares? Like, to me, the cool part about grappling that I really think, right? It's like, man, maybe this is what we got to do to unite the country, right? Get ready to grapple, because with jiu-jitsu, when we're competing, we're out there battling it out. You know, we're, you know, for me, I'm a man, so we're brothers in arms in competition. We're warriors out there battling each other, and you know, we're trying to take each other's heads off. And in spite of all sorts of differences that we might have, whether we're where we're from, you know, what God we pray to, what part of the country or world we come from, whatever, we have a mutual respect for one another, right? And I like that because grappling transcends it. To me, it's like, Jonathan Haidt talks about this in one of his books. He's like, you know, a lot of times when you look at what's going on in the world, especially that all the social media garbage that's creating division and all the politicians doing it, they always try to make a big fuss about our differences, right? But if you go out for a moment in groups of people and some talk to people, for the most part, most people, if you try to find your shared humanity, the things that you share, things are a little bit different. And so to me, jiu-jitsu is like a shared bond that we have, where even in 2024, we can have different beliefs and we can have mutual respect for each other. Who'd have thunk it? Right. So for me, like, I just look at that. I'm like, why can't he just pray to his preferred God? Maybe it's the American in me, you know, freedom of religion, but I would rather keep it to where you can pray to your person. It's fine. Let's come out and battle it out. And, you know, if you want to make a cross across your chest, or if you want to bow to your knees, who cares? Do your thing. Do your thing. And again, we're going to have respect because we're going to battle it out. Also, too, in that same article, it was saying that I guess Japan is possibly thinking about pulling out of the IJF.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, because of unfair practices and some of the things they don't like, which, you know, the birthplace of judo is like, you know, we're kind of done with this sort of thing. We don't like what it's becoming. That's pretty intense, right? That's like the IBJJF being like sort of boycotted by Brazilians. You know, like it's a big deal. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know what's going to come of that, but I saw that in the article, and to me, just it says that, hey, something's going in the wrong direction. We don't like this. And, you know, you have different things happening there. And so that's another reason why I would not want to have it as an Olympic sport, because I don't want it to be like become this little micromanaged thing where, you know, because someone got upset about something or whatever, that we have to like neuter anybody to have any personality.
Yeah.
Like, be yourself, go compete. Like, let's focus on the competition and not worry about all that other stuff.
Well, I think it's kind of like having a democracy, right? You've got people that like are going to vote with their time, their money, whatever they want to do.
Right.
Like, okay, I just don't have this one flavor. Like, I can go and do these other things. I feel like this feels better to me, or I enjoy doing this. I can do no-gi. I can wear my weird spats or whatever, or I can wear the gi if I want to do that. Like, and that's a whole, like, those are almost like, now those are kind of becoming two different, almost like two different sports in some way in jiu-jitsu, two major different subsets. But like, let me ask you this. What do you think Japan withdrawing from the Olympics, how do you think that would impact judo? Do you think that would make things change? Or obviously the IJF is losing its way.
Yeah.
If you have things like that, like the birthplace of judo is like, hey, we're not cool with this. We're not down. We're going elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or we're not going to be a part of it. Like, obviously means that you're losing your way.
Maybe. So here's the deal. I don't know. So the thing is I've heard this, and I don't know enough about judo to be honest with this, right? So, but what I've heard people say is that, like, certain times, like, let's say a particular rule or something's happening, you know, the certain countries that have sway within the IJF will exert force and say, listen, we don't like that this is happening. Like when like some Sambo guys and Eastern Europeans were coming in doing the leg attacks. A lot of countries were like, we don't like this. And so therefore they exerted some sort of force where they made them change that rule. So maybe this is just a play to say, hey, we don't like something that we don't like, and we're going to pull out if you don't change it, you know, or something like that, because, you know, they do have it. But if there was, I don't know but if they do have a legitimate like issue with it, then you might have all of a sudden multiple countries that are like, yeah, I think we're done. Let's create another one. Let's create a different organization. We don't like this anymore. We're going to take our ball and go somewhere else. You could have something like that. I don't know. Again, when you start getting into this restrictive thing where you keep peeling things back, I just think that it creates something that maybe isn't ideal. Personally, and again, this is my philosophy. And for some of you guys that are judoka, you might have a particular opinion, or you have some insights. I know that we have a lot of judoka and people that have done judo that listen. So if you guys have insight, you're welcome to share those in the comments, or through a message on whatever on Patreon or through the Instagram. But again, I don't know exactly. I just know that they're possibly pulling out, but that could be to exert force, or it could be because they have a true grievance.
Yeah, one issue is like you're basically taking the sport. So let's talk about judo, for example, and we can contrast it with jiu-jitsu. You're taking the sport and you're putting a very limited amount of people in charge of the direction that the sport goes, right? Instead of having a wide scope of like people from different countries, and like, okay, so we have competitions that are more like this, or in this side of the US, we have, ADCC or this or that, whatever. So I just think it kind of, it makes it one way, and also just like whoever's in charge is going to kind of guide it in that direction. I don't know if that's like, I don't know if one person being in charge is probably not the best idea.
It's a group.
Well, not one person, but a very select group of people.
So, I mean, that's my thing. And again, this might be sort of like I have a bit of a libertarian slant when it comes to politics, right? I generally don't like big centralized governing bodies over top of things. I'm kind of a less is more kind of guy, because to me, people can then do things and they can sort of make decisions for themselves, opposed to having some big body make decisions for them. Because again, it's like when you have big centralized governing bodies and they're in a good state, it can be a great thing. But in a lot of cases, it devolves into something that's not very good over and over. You can see it through history. And so for me, it's like, like in jiu-jitsu, if they don't like something, they can go somewhere else. And when that other organization begins to grow, it's going to put pressure onto other organizations, right? To change. And so I like that. That's not necessarily going to exist. Now, let's say, imagine that you have multiple governing bodies for judo, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're not the only game in town. Maybe you have a change there. Maybe they have different rule sets, and people can then decide, hey, we want to we want more groundwork to be in judo, or we want there to be more like availability for leg attacks, and they can go there and it can grow from there. But again, it's tough to do that when one is considered the main focus, because it's Olympics is the big show for judo, right?
Do you think there are any compromises? Like maybe we have in wrestling, there's different, obviously different rule sets, so you can win different. There's like Greco-Roman. Is that in the Olympics? What else?
Yeah, Greco-Roman, and you have Greco, and then you have freestyle,
right? So different rule sets. So maybe having a gi and a no gi in the Olympics, do you think that would be like a compromise?
I think it's just too much. I'm like, just I don't know. Again, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think if it became an Olympic sport, because jiu-jitsu's a little, there's too much. We're too focused on like growing monetary options for people at this point. Like, we're focused on that. Like, that's the kind of things we want to see fighters get paid. So I think you would have, if judo did get into or jiu-jitsu got into the Olympics, it would be something like boxing, where you would have the amateur circuit, and then that would end with the Olympics, and it would hold a certain weight. And then there would be professional jiu-jitsu organizations, kind of similar to how sometimes you'll see like, okay, like, like a IBJJF world champion, right? Okay, well, you got a world champion. You didn't win any money, but you got prestige, or you have skill that is you basically, we're like, you're pretty good. So then you might have a better chance of getting on a paid show, such as an Who's Number One, or an EBI, or Fight Pass or something like that. Or PGF. You have an option to get money there elsewhere because of the notoriety that you have. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. But I think that would be an option, and that would be what it would do, is kind of go the boxing route, where you have the amateur and professional divisions afterwards.
Yeah. Or we're seeing more of that though now. Like we're seeing, kind of really professional. What would you say as far as jiu-jitsu goes? I'm just curious as what you're thinking. Like, what would you say, like professional, like ADCC, would you say is more of a professional kind of, if you've done ADCC, would you say you're a pro grappler at that point?
Well, I mean, you're getting paid.
So you're,
I mean, to me, that's the big difference of an amateur and a professional.
Sure.
Do you get paid? Like Stephen Pressfield, that's his whole delineation between amateur and professional. Are you getting paid? You know, like, do you get paid to do this? Because if you get paid to do this, that is essentially now you have a job. Like, and you don't have to think of, and I don't have, like, job doesn't have to be soul sucking, right? If you enjoy what you're doing, then your job can be a beautiful job, right? But you're getting paid money to do it. You're a professional now, right? Opposed to you're just doing this. And amateurs, you're just kind of, you're having fun. You're just doing it. Whereas, like, okay, when you put the pressure, I'm now doing this thing and it's considered almost like a work thing because I'm making money. You're a professional.
Yeah. And in jiu-jitsu, you've got, professionals in different planes. I mean, you got coaches who are professionals. Sure. And you also have athletes that are professionals. So I guess you got different kind of, avenues of being a professional in jiu-jitsu, making a career out of jiu-jitsu, I guess.
Now, again, when we talk about professionals, we could talk about, like, you guess you could break it down by training time, and you can say, well, he's a professional because he trains every day, but, like, he hasn't made a dime. Well, again, everybody can make their split somewhere. I just like the split of, are you getting paid money to do it? Because if you're getting paid money, then you're a professional grappler. And like you said, you can get paid money for coaching and doing private lessons, doing seminars, or competing itself, like getting paid money to be brought out for seminars, right? That is you're now a professional. It's a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may not be at, like, the top of the heap professional, but, like, you're somewhere in there, you're getting paid money.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, like, if there's any, I don't know, any benefit in I don't know. What do you think as far as, like, growth of jiu-jitsu? Is there anything you think that would help? Obviously, we think judo, or not judo, we talk about the Olympics kind of stifling it a little bit. What do you think would help the growth of jiu-jitsu besides,
I think,
maybe money? Money's a big
growing.
thing.
Yeah. Like, for you got to think, like, 10 years ago, man, it wasn't 10 years ago. And in a lot of these 12 years ago, a lot of these organizations, dude, they weren't doing anything. Like, people who haven't been around very long do not realize the amount of growth that's happened with our sport, with our martial arts.
Yeah.
I not a think. I know it's gotten so big. Like, 10 years ago, you had, like, lots of places that had no black belts. Right? Like you go to certain places in Europe, you go to, like, certain places in different countries. You didn't have black belts. Now they got black belts. They have good black belts, very skilled black belts that can make it to a high level. I was talking to a person in China, like, he's talking about, like, they've got their gym there or whatever. And it's like, it's a, gym's kind of growing there, and it's relatively new out there for them. Like, he's like, we didn't have black belts this long ago. So it is growing, and it's growing like a weed because of a couple things. Number one is because we have different avenues for people. We have a lifestyle element to it, right? Because, again, 99% of people are not trying to compete professionally. Probably 99.9% of people doing it are not trying to compete professionally and make this their life. They're just doing this because it adds something to their life. It improves their life. It benefits them. It gives them this anchoring habit that seems to have all these other benefits off from that, right? So they do it for that reason. And so because of that, we have competitors, and that's fun. We all like competing, and we like watching good competition matches and stuff like that. But the fact that we have the competition element, or the lifestyle element to it, where instead of it becoming your whole life, it's just simply a part of it. You can do this, and you can use this habit to be in better shape, to help you learn some fighting skills, to, give you something that, like, gives you a physical exertion, and it helps you with your mental and physical, like, clarity. And you might feel like it. I was talking to one of my students the other day. We're doing interviews. He's like, I feel like it makes me a better father, more present husband, because I get this energy out of me. And now I can be present for my family. Like, so those are beautiful things. And so that element of it, I think, is what really grows it, because otherwise, if it was just about competitions and getting to the Olympics, you're going to have a small sliver of people. Right. But like with jiu-jitsu, we have all these elements where we're like, hey, you're training a little bit, but you're 45 years old. So obviously you're never going to be the adult world champion, but what we got for you, fella? We got masters divisions. Get your old butt off the couch and let's go compete against each other. And we'll go find some other old fellas to, like, battle it out with you. Right. Yeah. That's a cool thing. So, like, you don't have to be a hardcore train every single day professional to go out there, and you still have the fun of experience of competing. It's just a beautiful thing. So there's a lot of elements to jiu-jitsu. And again, to me, that comes from the sort of the free nature of it. And also because we're not simply chasing after the Olympics. Like, we're gym owners. We're trying to make a buck, to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, keep the gym doors open, keep the lights on. Again, I know sometimes people have weird things about money and they feel dirty with it, like, ooh, dirty money. But again, if you're, like, making literally, I did these interviews with the students, right? They're like, man, it's helped me out so much in my life. If that's how you're making money, like, that's a beautiful way to make a living,
100%,
right? Opposed to, like, hey, we're selling, like, some drugs that, like, are going to mess your world up, right? Like, you look at pharmaceutical companies, look at some of the stuff that they sell to people and what damage it's done. It's a terrible way to make money. Or if you're saying I'm bringing and adding, you know, I'm not just taking cookies from the jar, I'm putting them back in. I'm adding to the jar. I'm putting back into the community, the group. And people, like, I literally say, hey, if you want to train here, great. If you don't, no big deal. And you leave the offer. It's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, there's a much more, it's this big interest where we're all trying to grow our own things. And then because of that, there's this competition element, there's this creative element that flourishes. And so it happens.
Yeah.
And speaking of competitions, one of the other reasons why I'm not a big fan, and again, I could be wrong about this to some degree, but I was talking to a friend of mine who big into wrestling, helps run jiu-jitsu competitions, wrestling competitions, and also has a bit of a judo background. He was talking about wanting to run judo competitions, right? He's like, I want to help grow the sport and everything else because I love judo. But he said that because of the federation regulations and all the rules and everything else associated with it, he's like, dude, it is a royal pain in the acai to try to like grow this thing, right? So he's like, because you just can't, you know, jiu-jitsu competitions, you can throw a mat down out in the field, get a ref, a couple competitors, and have a medic on the side waiting in case something goes wrong, and boom, you got yourself a tournament. And I've been around tournaments that were like literally mats out in a field. You know, hey, we're gonna like have an outdoor competition, right? Because we couldn't secure a venue, so we're just doing it out at a damn park. You know, and whatever else, man, it works. But then, you know, you get into a situation where now you have stifling regulations where it has to be this way and that way, and we have to have this many refs, and the mat space has to be this big, and you know, all these other things. It's like, man, that's a lot. Where let's say if you were just trying to get a tournament going in some small area, that could benefit a local community to have a chance to compete, that would be a net benefit, but you can't do it because of regulations.
Yeah. So they will stop any kind of tournaments. You have to basically
I don't know the full extent. We were talking in passing,
Okay.
and he was basically saying if I wanted to do a competition, but because of the federation regulations, he started naming all these different like these things that he would have to be there. He's like, I just can't do it. It's not feasible. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. Now, as far as like what they do to exert force on that, whether they're going to have the judo police come in and like, you know, like take care of it, I don't know. But basically they won't allow it, or they won't give it licensing or whatever that is that they do, but they won't do it. You know, so
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that really like limits so much. You know, I was just thinking when you were talking about when you start 20 years, how many years has it been?
2003. So
21 years ago, right? You didn't start jiu-jitsu for any other reason than to get into MMA.
Yeah. I wanted to fight.
And even when I started, it's been 16 years ago, something like that. It was like, when are you going to fight? Are you going to fight? And I was like, no, I'm just here to like,
everybody fought.
I'm just here to do jiu-jitsu. Like, and like, what? Why are you, you know, and the gym that I started at,
You were kind of that first generation that did that.
It was weird, right? Like, I don't know, like, because I kept getting asked to fight. And I was like, dude, I'm like 27, 26, and I'm in school to be a physical therapist. I don't want to get my face bashed in. And honestly, I learned that lesson very quickly when I had a little bit of a light sparring match with professional MMA fighters that just beat the brakes off me. And I had dizzy spells for 2 weeks.
Yeah, those are old days.
He's like
proper sparring.
Well, he's like, hey man, why don't you put some gloves on? No pads, nothing. He just beat the brakes off me for like, it seemed like it was a long time. It was probably about 2-3 minutes, and I had enough. But
if like, you're not used to sparring, that's a long time.
Hell no, man. And so it was just you saw people coming in just more or less now to be a hobbyist, like just to do it because like maybe you're searching for something, or you were an athlete, you know, in high school, and you're like, man, I just want to scratch that itch. And now that's like, I feel like the growth of jiu-jitsu, one of the areas of growth is these hobbyists that have careers outside of jiu-jitsu, and they're using their money to be like, I want to support jiu-jitsu. I want to, you know, I want to buy flow, or I want to go to this tournament and watch and support, or I even want to compete at this masters, whatever division, right? Without those people that aren't like the hobbyists, you're not going to have the competitors that can actually have the money or financial backing there to, you know, to make a career out of it. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's
you got to have it all. And I think the evolution now is more evident, and you have obviously more hobbyists, and you have guys that are coming in to train MMA. So
also too, when you think about jiu-jitsu, again, it's a tough sport. It takes its toll on the body,
100%,
but it's a little bit easier in judo. Like when you look at judo and the throws, God bless me, they're tough. It's like, it's hard throws. Like I've been to some judo seminars, and some of them had like some older guys, and you know, you'll see older guys in jiu-jitsu, and they're rugged guys, and they're like beat up a bit, right? You know, but looking at these guys, they all had, like, except for one of them, almost all of them had really bad back issues because you get slammed all the time. You know what I mean? Like back and neck issues. It's like, anybody that's been slammed on the mat, like you can understand, even if you're very skilled, one wrong post. I mean, you look at what happened with Marigali. One wrong post, boom, dislocated shoulder. Now he's going through surgery. He has a long road ahead of him.
Yep.
That's all it takes. One wrong post to your feet, boom, you're twisting your knee, and boom, you're out. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen in jiu-jitsu, but I'm just saying that throws have a inherent risk to them that is not existing, that doesn't exist in the same level of intensity as groundwork, where again, there's still risks, there's still things you got to be worried about, but it's a lower risk.
I would agree.
And so I think that allows it allows for more people. It makes it more accessible to people to where you can train takedowns a bit. You can understand how they work. You can be decent and proficient at them, but at the same time, it's not like you have to do them every single day for tons and tons and tons and tons of reps. Where you can, as we talked about many times in the podcast, you can kind of rotate the tires. You can play different positions, and maybe your knee's a little tweaked. Hey, let's go to the ground. Let's stay down here. That kind of thing, opposed to, oh man, we got to do randori again. We got to do throws, and because our sport, because of the Olympics, does not allow a lot of newaza. Basically, as soon as we go to the ground, I got a few seconds, and then we're back up on our feet again.
Well, really, I wouldn't say one way, but there's one best way, I guess, maybe to win a judo match is to throw somebody and pin them, right? Then once they land on the back, it's over.
Yeah,
that's really it.
There's guys that like there's a guy like Kanto who like would do these really cool like guard pulls and arm locks and things like that, but they're typically an exception.
Right.
They're not like the rule most
not
of the time.
The major.
The focus is the throw.
Yeah, and so the other thing is the high impact, right? Like, I mean, you can't take the high impact throws for as much. Like jiu-jitsu, you can start standing and then sit to guard or things like that. Obviously in judo, you cannot do that. So I think that, that's the thing. Like, I think that really is, it's just more, it's nicer to it's not nice to your body by any means. It breaks your body down. But I think judo does that at a way faster pace. And it's a lot harder on you.
For certain areas, right? And again, this is not a knock against jiu-jitsu or judo. Because again, I've seen a lot of jiu-jitsu guys who are broken from getting their arms popped and have to have surgeries for bone spurs 100%. And like knees ripped from heel hooks and things like that. So again, I'm not saying that, but again, just saying that I've been around for a while, and it's like one of the things where you just see, like, again, a lot of back issues. Again, with jiu-jitsu gets, where like if you're constantly rolling up and inverting and stuff, but then there's just some inherent risks with throws that if you're like just an average person who's just wanting to train a little bit and get some exercise, you may not want to be in a sport that is constantly doing those high impact throws, which again, this is more of I think that then allows more people to be involved in it. It makes it more accessible to more people. But again, so, those are some reasons, guys. That's kind of where my thoughts are with it, as far as why I'm not a big fan of jiu-jitsu being in the Olympics personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's the way we have it right now is really, it's fun. It's interesting. There's different ways.
Pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean,
those are my cons though.
Yeah. But I think definitely when we talk about it, there's definitely more pros to the way jiu-jitsu is now than it being in the Olympics.
I believe so.
Yes. And I agree. As well.
So guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm sure some of you guys have opinions about what I shared. So if you guys do want to share your opinions, you can either, if you're on the YouTube page, you can drop your comments down below. And if you're following us on social media or whatever, you can always send us a message or an email and, check out your comments, maybe read it for an episode in the future. And again, if I got any of that information wrong about some of the rules and stuff with judo, you can let me know so I can correct myself in the future. It's just the information that I've gathered or been told by other judokas or people involved in the sport. And so to the best of my knowledge, if you guys want to check out some of our sponsors and support the podcast, check them out. charlesweb.com. Great CBD products. I like to use it at nighttime before I go to sleep, which many of you guys probably know. charlesweb.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU 30 for 30% off your order on whatever you buy. If you guys want to get some new gear for jiu-jitsu, t-shirts, no-gi gear, rash guards, shorts. I said no-gi gear. You guys get that. Gis, whatever it is. Anything jiu-jitsu related, you can check it out at epicrollbjj.com. Also, keep your eyes peeled. I'm going to be coming out with some new rash guards. I've got the prototype made. I love the designs. It looks really good. So it's going to be coming out in the near future. And I will be giving a special discount to those of you who are subscribed to my Chew Crew email letter that I send out daily. Speaking of which, if you would like to get my daily email letter, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. When you join up, you'll get access to a couple free ebooks that I give away. Some are on designing your own game plan, which people have used to do competitions, and I've got a lot of positive feedback on it. Another one is on drilling strategies, and I'm going to be updating that one because that one was written almost 10 years ago. So I'm going to be changing up some of that stuff and getting it redone. More on that later. And then you get my daily email letter that I send out that goes into anything and everything I would like to share with you that I think would be useful to you on and off the mat. I also do give exclusive discounts and things like that inside of that letter. So if you would like those discounts for the rash guards per se, then join up. You can unsubscribe at any time, but also too, if me making $1 or a few bucks off of jiu-jitsu bothers you, then don't sign up. Just keep on moving. You can just listen for free, and I have no problems, no bones about it. And then also too, if you guys want to support the Patreon, you can do so by going to the website at patreon.com/the-Chewjitsu-podcast. When you join up there, you'll get a bunch of different perks. If you want to see what those perks are, you can go to the Patreon, patreon.com/the-Jiu-Jitsu-podcast. Check it out. See what we offer. See if you're interested. It's a very inexpensive price. It supports the podcast so we can keep coming to you each and every week. And guys, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hope you got a couple ideas to chew on, and we'll talk to you next week.